My brother Danny, as some of you may know by now, has decided to share his deportation story and his experience in moving back to Mexico on our channel. Now, before we get to that part in this video, there are a couple of things that I would like to say, and I really hope you stick around to hear them out. I want to start off by fully disclosing that we do monetize from this YouTube channel thanks to your support, and I'm sure you are all well aware since you see the ads on our videos. Every dime that is made off part one and part two of his story and experience will go directly to his and my nephew's pocket. If anybody ought to monetize from Danny's story and experience, it should be himself only. By now, I hope that you all know the relationship that I have with my brother, and you have my word that every dime that is made off these videos will go directly to his pocket. Thing number two, my brother has finally decided to start a YouTube channel, as many of you have requested. And we want to use our platform, we want to use our community and our YouTube channel to give more exposure to his story and his YouTube channel as well. So we're going to tag his YouTube channel in the description below, and we really encourage you to follow him, subscribe to him as he learns to become a content creator and also share his life and what it looks like south of the border with him and his son. And lastly, my brother Danny is not the type of person to open up and talk about experiences that he has gone through. So for him to step up and do this means a lot. And I tell you this because I know my brother. Now, he doesn't know what I'm saying on the intro of this video, but I'm letting you know. It's not like him. But he understands the importance and he sees what a beautiful community you can build online when you don't have one physically. And I've encouraged him to get out of his shell, and try to rebuild his life little by little, and finding support online where so many of you have also offered support to our family. And my experience with social media has been nothing but excellence and beautiful. And I want him to have that same type of feel and community. So with that being said, here's his story in his own words. And if you subscribe to any channel today, subscribe to his.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danny. A lot of you have probably seen me around Carlos's YouTube page, and he's kind of encouraged me to start my own YouTube channel. So I've been getting a lot of questions and a lot of people asking me how I ended up in Mexico. I've never really told my side of the story about what happened to me, so I figured, why not, let people know what happened and how I ended up in Mexico. So I've been to Mexico for a little over 2 years. Um, 3 years ago, back in this July would be 3 years ago, I was approached by a detective where I used to work, a detective from the county where I used to live, and he wanted to talk to me. So I said, okay, sure. And he approached me and told me that I was being investigated for stealing 90,000, or they were accusing me of stealing $90,000. At the time, I mean, I was floored. I didn't have $90,000, obviously. So, uh, obviously, I was let go from where I was, and I kind of just sat around waiting to see what was going to happen. I mean, obviously, I knew that I didn't take $90,000. So I just sat back and waited and was waiting to see what was going to come of it. And then on August 22nd, um, I got a phone call from the same detective, and he said that there was a warrant for my arrest, and should I either turn myself in or tell them where I'm at so that they can come get me. So, obviously I was like, I turned myself in. The county jail was about an hour and 15 minutes away from where I live. So I called them and I said, I told him over the phone, I said, no, no need to worry. I'll turn myself in. So when I got there, they had three charges on me. Um, there, it was a total of like $950. Um, it was three counts of larceny by employee. The charges, the amount of each charge was around like 250, 350, and like 320. So they presented the charges with me. I said, okay, well, I knew that I was going to get a bond, but unfortunately, since I was originally from Mexico, originally born in Mexico, they considered me a flight risk. I did have DACA, and I did, I told them like I had no intentions on ever going back to Mexico. I tried to like kind of make my case there when I was there, but they said no. You're considered a flight risk. So they put a $90,000 bond on me, and that kind of at the time I didn't really know how bonds worked. I've never been in trouble with the law. I've never really had any issues apart from well, no, I'm sorry. I mean parking tickets and speeding tickets, but that's not considered criminal, I don't think. But so I never knew I didn't know anything about it. I thought at the time like I didn't think much of the bond or whatever. So um, my family at the time was willing to pay whatever it took to get me out. Unfortunately, we couldn't find a bondsman that was willing to take the risk because bondsmen in the area like saw the cases, saw everything. They didn't really know my charges; they just knew the bond amount, so they considered me a flight risk because of the bond amount. So, I sat in the county jail for a while. My family finally were able to hire a lawyer, and I remember the first kind of I remember the first meeting I had with my criminal lawyer. He had recently seen a post on Facebook from the owner's granddaughter. And she posted that my brother and I had stolen 90,000 or no, I'm sorry, no, that's my bond. I'm sorry. That we had stolen $500,000. $500,000 is what we were being accused of stealing there where we lived. So, you know, we he saw that post, my criminal lawyer saw that post and he thought, okay, this guy's being charged with stealing $500,000, I guess. So I remember he finally came to the county jail. I had to sit down with him, and he sat me down and he just started asking me like, hey, like let me see your charges, let me see what you're being charged with. So I handed him the three charges that I had, and he kind of just looked at me and goes, "Where's the rest?" I go, "Excuse me." He goes, "Where's the rest?" I said, "That this is all I was given." And he just looked at me with this like long stare and was like, he's like, I'm sorry, I thought you're being like accused of stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. What are these charges? Like there should be more. I said no. I was like, this is all that they gave me. This is all I'm being charged with at the time. And he kind of like he was he was dumbfounded, I guess. He had some choice of words for the situation I was in, and he just said like this is outrageous. There's no reason why you should have a $90,000 bond on $920 that you're being accused of stealing. I was honest with him. I was like, I don't know how bonds work. I don't know. Like I've been told it's a lot, but I'm not. I don't know anything about the how these things work. So he was just completely lost for words at the time. He said, he's like, don't worry, like I'll schedule a court date to have this bond reduced. There's no judge in the world that's going to look at this and think that this is outright like justified. And so I had to sit in county jail for a while. And while I was there, I sorry, I forgot to mention, I had a almost 3-month-old child, my son, and I had a fiance, of course, at the time. And it was a lot for us because, it was something that we didn't expect and something that, kind of, I mean, ultimately shook turned our whole life upside down, sort of. And yeah, so after that appointment, my first appointment with my lawyer, I sat down and kind of he just told me wait it out. We're gonna go to court, we're gonna have this bond reduced, and we're gonna be good. And I waited, and then finally I had my first court date. And my lawyer was very optimistic, of course. I was as well, but obviously I was nervous. Never been in a situation like this before in my life. Um, we he presented all the evidence for me, and then the ADA at the time tried to say that I was a flight risk, and that the minute I got out I was going to flee to Mexico, and all this stuff, obviously, to try to keep me in there. Um I remember they were, my lawyer, the ADA, and the judge kind of going back and forth a little bit on the situation, and finally the judge was like, "All right, let's all right, bring up his criminal history, and I'm gonna make a judgment based off that." And it took him a little bit. The ADA and like their side kind of took a little bit to pull up my criminal history. My criminal lawyer was like, "Sir, Your Honor, he has no criminal history whatsoever." And then finally, when the ADA said no, no criminal history, he said, "All right, I'm sorry. I think at the time, 5,000. He lowered it from 90,000 all the way down to 5,000." And we considered that a win. We thought, cool, I get to pay this. I get to get out and be with my family. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. A couple days into me being in the county jail, immigration sent out a detainer, I think is what they called it. So after I paid my bond, I had to wait 48 hours. And if immigration doesn't come and pick me up, I'm allowed to be released. So I sat there and I waited. After my family paid the bond, I waited. Uh, I remember it was the 40, I kept track of the hours because, as an immigrant being in the United States, ICE immigration custody, is something that, you always fear because you never know what can happen. And so I was counting down the hours. It was around noon on the day I was supposed to be released. It was like the 45th hour or so, and I was set to be released at 3 that afternoon. And then they kind of called me down and they're like, "Hey, get your stuff. You're out of here." And in my mind, I'm optimistic. I'm thinking, cool, like, oh, I'm gonna get released. Like, in my head at the time, I thought, these charges are. I don't see how you can deport someone based off these charges, even if they were true or not. I thought to myself, like, this is something that I'll be able to go home to my family at the end of the day. And so I go down and I ask questions. I don't know what's going on, so but no one's answering me, so I'm like a little confused. I remember they gave me my clothes. I changed into my regular clothes, signed my release forms or whatever. And I thought, all right, cool. Like, my family's gonna be here soon. Like, I'm about to go. And then I remember sitting in the lobby, and I see these two gentlemen walking in, and like I could feel my heart drop because like my instincts told me, oh, these guys are immigration officers. And I remember them going up to the front, talking to them. I couldn't really hear what they were saying. I kind of was just trying to like stay calm. And then they turn around, asked me what my name was. I told them what my name was, and they said, "All right, well, we have a warrant for your arrest. You're going to be coming with us." And so I was, at that moment, I felt lost. I felt defeated. I was just, I didn't know what to expect being in immigration custody. So I tried to plead with them. I said, "Look, my family thinks I'm getting out today, think that I'm going to be released. Is there any way I can call them and let them know, like, hey, like, I'm I'm being shipped off to Alamas County, I think it's where I was gonna go to, for a little bit, and they were kind of like, no, it's like it's a safety issue. Like, we can't really call them as you're being transported because it's something that, it kind of violates whatever like rules or whatever they have. So, but I mean, I kept telling them like, hey, like, look, I have a 3 month old at the time. He was a little over 3, I think, 3 months old. I was like, they're driving an hour and a half to come get me. I don't want them to show up and get the news that I'm in immigration custody. And so I finally he caved in. He's like, all right, look, listen, when we get out on the road and we get a little ways away, I'll give me their number and I'll call your mom and let them know. And so he was nice enough to call my mom and tell him like, hey, like, he's being picked up by immigration, but this doesn't mean he's being deported or anything like that. He has, there's still a process that he has to go through before any of that happens. So like he was being he was really nice. Really nice. He tried to explain the situation to my mom as best as he could. He spoke Spanish. I don't want to say that he was any. I don't know what he was, but he did speak Spanish to her and kind of give her an explanation as to what was happening. So, as someone who has lived his entire life in the U.S., being in immigration custody, I thought to myself like, this could be the beginning of the end for my life here in the U.S. And well, as you can tell, it was. But yeah. So then once I got to Alamask County, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's like 40 minutes outside of Raleigh. I was held there for 10 days. The process there was very long. They have to make sure they have everything right. They don't want, they're afraid of lawsuits and stuff, so they do physicals, they do all sorts of stuff for you. So the process to get checked into there was very long. Spent most of my day kind of answering questions and stuff like that. So finally, I was able to get into the section where immigrants are held there at the county, and I just started talking to people and kind of just waited my time out. I was in constant daily contact with my mom and my fiance at the time, and just kind of reassuring them like I was doing well and that everything's gonna work out. And they're doing the same for me, um, but then from Alamask County, you're shipped to uh, Lumpkin, Georgia, which is close to Atlanta. I think it's like about an hour outside of Atlanta, and that's where the actual the immigration prison, if you want to call it, is, and that's where immigrants are held for their courts, for their deportation process and everything. So I was waiting to be shipped from Alamance County to Lumpkin, Georgia, but then throughout that time, on my 10th day, I remember waking up. All you do is sleep there. I mean, the conditions there were we had one TV. We weren't allowed to change the channel. Whatever was on the TV, you have to watch. Um, it was a very small room where uh, 8 of us shared. No, I'm sorry, 12 of us shared, and it was a very small room. You kind of were pretty much shoulder to shoulder with them, and you just kind of, you get to know them. There's no getting away from that. And I mean, some of these guys were possession of drugs with intent to distribute. Most of them were drug charges for the guys that were there. Everyone, I mean, considering the position they're in and that I was in, like everyone was nice. I don't know how else to put it. They were friendly, they were nice. Like obviously I was worried first getting there, but everyone was pretty nice and chill and relaxed. So it kind of made me feel a little better. But then, like I said, after the 10th day, I woke up, and I was the only one that was bilingual enough to be able to communicate with the people being held there, and the people that were in charge of the immigration officers in charge of us there. So I was always the one translating for everyone and doing all that stuff. So like I said, on the 10th day, I remember waking up, and some of us didn't have the socks that we are, I guess, required to get from them, or underwear, shirts, stuff like that, clothing that we needed, or the cleaning supplies. So, we were getting kind of frustrated with that. So they woke me up and they kind of were like, hey, we need you to translate what we need to this guy. He's here right now. I said, all right, yeah, let me get up real quick and go. And I remember explaining to him, like, yeah, I didn't have any socks given to me. Some of the guys didn't have any boxers. Some of them didn't have shirts, so they were kind of washing their stuff every night and stuff. So I kind of explained to the guy, and the guy was like, well, the guys, like the actual county officers, like the people that are not immigration officers, but the county was supposed to supply all that, and they were going to look into it and get all that figured out. And this is where the confusion kind of starts with me. At that point, I kind of knew where I was heading. I was going from, county jail, immigration, and then either from there I was going to be released, or I was going to go back to Mexico. I was going to get deported back to Mexico. So, but then this is where the confusion started, because I remember after I explained the issues that we were having with the guy, he asked me, he's like, "What is your name?" And I gave him my name, Daniel Arellano Munoz, and he goes, "Oh, you need to pack your things. You're going back to Dare County." And I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "The county has issued another charge on you." And I said, "Oh, do you know like how much it's for or what's going on?" He's like, "No, not really." He goes, I was told to tell you to get your stuff together. They'll be here around, I think I think it was like 1 o'clock or something." And and so I was like, in my mind, I thought, whoa, the further I am away from immigration, the better. The further I can get away from their custody and into Dare County, maybe I can, there's hope for me to forget about it. So I packed my things, and before he left, the immigration guy walks up to me and goes, he asked me, like, "What are you being charged with? Like, what are your charges? Do you have convictions, anything?" I said, "No, like, I'm being charged with stealing a little over $900 from a place I worked at." He goes, he looked at me and goes, "That's it?" I go, "Yeah, that's it." He's like, did you have a visa or anything like that?" I said, "I had DACA, but it expired I think the month I was locked up." And so he's like, "So you're just being charged with 900?" He's like, "You've never been in trouble before? You've never had any issues?" I was like, "No, like, this is my first time ever being in any situation like this." And he's like, we're not going to be seeing you again." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, I don't see why you're here in the first place. He's like, "You're going to go back to county, and I'm sure you're going to stay there, and I doubt we will be seeing you again." And when he told me that, I mean, the hope that I had shot up. I was super excited. I thought to myself, like, great, like, everything's starting to kind of clear up a little bit for me, a little bit. Sorry, motorcycle, and my mic ran out of battery. And so I thought to myself, actually, let me wait for this thing to go away. So I had about about an hour and a half of kind of downtime waiting for them to for the county to come pick me up. And I remember, while I was waiting, I was talking to the guys. They were asking me, like, "Hey, like, what do you want to talk to you about?" Because he kind of pulled me to the side, and they saw that I got happy. And I explained to them, like, these are my and they people subtly ask you when you're in there, like, "What are your charges? What are you in here for?" Whatever. So they knew what I was being charged with, and they were all like, "Oh man, like, you're good. Like, you're gonna go back. You're gonna be able to, like, fight your case or whatever happens, and you're gonna be able to stay." And I thought to myself, like, that would be best case scenario, obviously. And and so finally the time arrived where the county came and picked me up, and it happened to be the same detective that was investigating me. And so once he picked me up, I remember he was getting me into his car or whatever, and I was asking him, like, "Hey, like, what's going on? Like, am I being like, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, we put another charge on you." And I said, "Oh, how much is it for?" And he goes, "I think it was 350." He goes, $350. And I said to myself, "Oh, okay, like, all right." And so on the way back on the car ride, I started asking him, like, "Hey, like, I've already paid a bond. Like, what's going to happen now?" He's like, "Well, you're going to be given a new bond, and you know, once you pay that, we don't really know what's going to happen. We kind of, we're going to have to play it by ear, I guess." And I said, "All right, well, I thought to myself, immigration just told me they don't want me. Uh, I'm going back to county, so, like, everything's looking up for me." And then I remember that asking him again, like, "All right, so do you, like, any idea what my bond's going to be?" And he says, "Well, in the county, you're still considered a flight risk." And I kind of was baffled. I said, "Well, sorry, to add context to what I'm about to say, when you're picked up by immigration, you're asked to sign what you want. Do you want to just be deported? Do you want to stay and fight your case? Do you want to seek asylum?" So they give you options to do. Obviously, I signed, "I would like to stay and plead my case here with an immigration judge." I signed it, had a copy of it. I mean, I had everything in my possession. And to add to for you know so then when I told the detective, I said, "Well, I signed a piece of paper saying I want to stay and plead my case with an immigration judge. How is it that I'm being I'm signing something with the federal government saying I want to stay in the United States, but you guys in the county still consider me a flight risk, thinking that as soon as I pay my bond, I'm gonna like flee to Mexico. Like that's what I'm trying to avoid, is what I was telling him. He says, we don't care. We don't care. We consider you a flight risk, so you're gonna have another high bond. So he's trying to make small talk with me, and he's trying to like talk to me and I guess be my friend. I don't know if he was trying to get me to confess or do something, whatever cops do. But so, finally get to the county jail, back to the county jail I was originally in, and they held me in the like the holding cell for hours. I mean, I remember I was trying to get them to let me call my lawyer to let them know that I'm back, and they were just like, you're gonna have to wait, you're gonna have to wait. And so then I remember, sorry, I don't know what the person's called that gives you your bond, the magistrate or something like that. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but I remember going up with the detective to the window, and they were like cracking jokes, making these things, like cracking jokes about kind of not my situation, but she comes back with my bond and my fourth charge at the time and says, all right, you're being charged with $350. And then she looks at the detective and goes, look, his bond is missing a zero. She said, it's missing a zero. And I thought to myself, oh, well, that's a good thing. Like if it's missing a zero, I guess it's going to be a lot lower than what they originally wanted. And it was. My bond was another larceny by employee charge for $350, and my bond was 50,000. So I'm no mathematician, but if you add another zero to 50,000, it's 500,000. So they were the county was doing everything in their power to keep me inside the county jail. Um, it was back to square one, kind of like I didn't get a chance to talk to my lawyer that afternoon, that evening, because they kept me in the holding cell for so long, and then I was given my bond and everything, so I was put back in the population or whatever, and I didn't have money to make a phone call. I didn't have anything because I had just I guess gotten there again. So the very next day, you have like a hearing, I guess, in front of the judge, where they read you your charges and you kind of understand what's going on. And I remember going to it, and I'm like, I haven't had a chance to talk to my lawyer. I haven't had a chance to like kind of see what's going on, if he has any idea what's going on. And then luckily enough for me, my criminal lawyer had court that morning as well. So I remember seeing him, and I just started banging on the door that I was being held in the back. And one of the officers came in and said, hey, what's the problem? I said, hey, like, that's my lawyer, I need to talk to him. Can you please tell him that I'm in here? And he goes, yeah, let me. And the officer that was transporting us was he was very, very nice to all the people there. He was a very nice guy. And so he's like, yeah, man, let me go get him, let me go tell him you're here. And then finally, my criminal lawyer came in and said, hey, let me take care of a few things, and then I'll get back to you. Just, I'll get to you, don't worry. And so I remember waiting for like 30-40 minutes, and then finally he came and got me, and he took me to like another courtroom where no one was at, and he asked me like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, he was as confused as I was. And I said, I don't know, like, they gave me another charge. They put a $50,000 bond on me again. And at that point, my lawyer, which John Parker, super great guy, he was like, he was finally frustrated with how the investigation was going. He again, he was very upset with how they were doing things and how everything was playing out with me. He thought that they were abusing their power to try to keep me locked up. They said, if he was telling me, if they really think you're stealing this money, they should do their investigation and then charge you. The fact that they're piecing it together and charging you as they go, he's like, that's abuse of power. Like, they can't do that. And so, sorry. And so he was pissed. He was pissed. He was cussing up a storm when we were in there, and he was like, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this, and if they can't give me clarification, like, we are going to start fighting back. Because at the time, my criminal lawyer was like, all this is like even if you're found guilty, right? Even if, he's like, it's a slap on the wrist. Like, you're not, like, this isn't something to be abusing their power with over you, right? And um, so yeah, so he took me to another court. He took me to another courtroom. We're talking and discussing everything, and I was kind of giving him what I've been through in the time. And I told him like immigration said that they don't want me back and all this stuff. So he said, "All right, that's good." Like he's like, "Now we're gonna have to just get this bond reduced," which he was like, "I don't see a judge not reducing your bond again." And then you pay it and you finally get out. So he was optimistic. I was optimistic again, and so while I was waiting for my bond hearing, my lawyer went to the ADA and the detective and said that they wanted to have a sit down with me, and they wanted to kind of go over everything. And again, mind you, they were still under the assumption that I had somehow pocketed hundreds of thousands of dollars from this business, right? Um, I think my brother has spoken about this, how the business itself, the system, the way that they kept track of everything was not good, to say the least. I wasn't involved in all the little things about the business as my brother was, but I still knew how messed up it was. I knew like this isn't ideally how you want to run a business, whatever. So I had to sit down with them. I was genuinely trying to help them understand the system and how everything was going. I was trying to explain to them how we did things and everything, but for the life of me, I could not understand what was going on. And so, like I said, I was going through it. I was trying to explain to them the entire situation, like how the system works and everything, and all this stuff. And uh, the trigger that hit me was when they started accusing my fiance, who had worked there for a couple of months, of doing the same thing. She was in and out helping us when like I needed a break, or my brother, or like she was in there helping us. But they started accusing her at the time, and the detective was like, "Look, if we're gonna just start charging everyone, because it looks like from the looks of it, from our investigation, you guys are just stealing all this money." And for me, when they started accusing her, that's where I remember blowing up in the meeting, and I said some choice words for the detective, and I said, PG version was, "Go ahead, do what you want, go, look at whoever you want. You're not going to find that money. That money does not. Us taking that money does not exist anywhere." I said, I joked with my brother once after my deportation. I said, "Look, I'm driving around a 2010 GMC Denali, which is a nice car. Don't get me wrong." I was like, if I had hundreds of thousands of dollars, I probably would have upgraded my car at some point, you know. So, but little jokes that we used to make like that to cope, I guess. But so the meeting ended up with them walking out and me in tears, uh, crying to my criminal lawyer, like, they're gonna go after her. She has nothing to do with this. Like, I don't know where they're getting all this information. And my criminal lawyer just looked at me and said, "Look, and you know, uh, I'm in Mexico, so it doesn't really matter anymore." But I remember he looked at me and he said, "Look, I'm your lawyer. I need to know the truth. Did you guys take this money or not?" He's like, "I'm here to protect you, but I need to know the truth." He said, "Did you guys take this money or not?" I said, "No." I was like, "There is no 90,000, 500,000, hundreds of thousands. There's no money. Like, we don't have access to this money. Like, we don't know where this money is going or what they're talking about." And that's when he put his foot down and said, "All right, now we're gonna go." He's like, "We're gonna go back at them now. Like, we're gonna start asking for all their information." He said he put his foot down and he was like, "Yeah, now we're gonna start fighting this now." Because like I said, my criminal lawyer was under the assumption like this seems to be just you know them tugging at whatever they can to maybe someone will confess to something or something like that. So my lawyer was, again, I think he did a great job. I think he's a great guy, and um, but so then I remember finally I went back to the county jail, and I sat there for about another 10 days before I had another court hearing to reduce my second bond. And in the courtroom, everyone was confused. We got there, and the judge was asking the ADA, like, why did they bring me back if immigration has me? They're like, this doesn't happen. If immigration picks you up, it's because they want to just do what they like. They're gonna do what they're gonna do with you, and that's it. Like, why did you guys ask for this guy back? The ADA was trying to tell them that, oh, we believe he's stolen tens of thousands of dollars, and we're just waiting on the last bit of information to be able to finally charge him with it. And then she started saying like, oh, once we're done with him here in county, immigration wants him back to deport him. So like there was a lot of talking, a lot of people just saying things, and I'm just sitting there trying to tell my lawyer like, the only time I spoke up in court was when like they were talking about me getting deported, and I looked at the judge and I said, look, Your Honor, like before I left, immigration themselves said that they don't want me back. I spoke to the guy that was in charge of us there, and he said like, we don't want you back. Because they at the time, they were going for people, I guess, that were being charged with large amounts of like hardened criminals, I guess you can say, convicted criminals. At the time, I don't think I was even indicted for my charges. But anyway, so yeah, so then I finally got to court, and the judge just looked and said, all right, $15,000. He said that based on these charges, like the most his bond should ever be is, I think each larceny by employee charge is, the guidelines for a bond is 500 to 5,000. So at most, my bond with all four charges should be no more than 20,000, based on the guidelines of how they make bonds, I guess. And so he looked at me and he said, I'm gonna make it 15,000 because I made it 5,000 last time, so now it's 20,000 with all of them put together. And so that's $1,500 to a bondsman and all that. And the same bondsman that paid for my first one paid for the second one, and he was also I think he was the most helpful guy throughout the whole process. I mean, he was coming to the jail and he was asking questions about me. He was giving information to my parents, to everyone that was asking, like, because we, again, like, it was a very confusing time because we just didn't know what was going on. But again, he was very helpful. He kept my family informed as best as he could based on the situation. And so yeah, so I finally so then after my court date, I remember they were trying to make it hard for me to pay my bond. They did not want me to pay my bond. um, I asked to speak to the captain, the same captain that was there during the first time, and he was kind of like, I told him, I was like, I requested to speak to him because like I didn't know what was going on. I needed someone to tell me like, hey, what's gonna happen if I pay this bond? Because like I'm not just gonna pay it if it's not gonna get me released. Even though by law, technically if I pay a bond, I'm free to go, unless the detainer's still active. And so I sent a couple of letters, like requests to speak to him or speak to someone, and they just got back to me and said, "Hey, we'll talk to you." And this was like a Thursday. He's like, "We'll talk to you next week." And I remember I sent another request saying, "I'm not waiting a week for you guys to come talk to me because it seems like you guys are just trying to keep me locked up." He's like, hey, they were just like, they didn't want. And so I sent a request and I said like, look, I don't care what you guys are trying to do or what is going on here. I am paying this bond and we'll see what happens. I was like, if you guys try to keep me here more than I should be, like whatever's gonna happen happens, but I'm paying this bond. So either you come talk to me today or I'm paying this bond. And that got his attention because he showed up like 20 minutes later. And he started talking to me and he started kind of like saying like, look, even if you pay this bond, you're not getting released. Like you're not getting released from county. I said, that is illegal, regardless of what anything has, like there's no way. He's like, no, he's like, you can pay this bond, you're not getting released. You're gonna stay here until your court dates, until you are found innocent or guilty or whatever. He's like, but you are not being released from county jail. He swore up and down. He said, you are not getting released. Go pay this bond, go waste your money, but we are not releasing you, no matter what. Even if immigration doesn't come and get you, we're not releasing you. And so at this point, everything, like I said, everything started getting confusing after that because I would call my mom and I would tell her what this guy said, and it was just a lot of people talking, and it was very and as you can guess, for someone in my situation who I always pride myself on being mentally strong and being able to keep my composure, it started to wear on me. I didn't know I didn't know what was gonna happen to me. You know, I didn't know. I for the first time in my life, like I truly felt helpless. Um, and I remember. Uh, so then I remember, telling him I'm paying this bond, whatever. If you guys want to hold me here, I remember immediately after I called my mom, and my mom called the my criminal lawyer, Mr. Parker, and Mr. Parker said, "Look, all I know is that they can't hold him for more than 48 hours after he pays his bond. If you guys go and pay his bond and they keep him even a second over 48 hours, I am personally going to go out over there, get him out of there, however I can." And so I think we paid it on. Forgive me, I don't know the exact dates, but I remember I want to believe we paid my mom paid it on a Thursday, on a Tuesday. No, excuse me, on a Tuesday. She paid it on a Tuesday afternoon. I think it was like around 5. It was either my mom or someone paid it, and I remember thinking, all right, I have 48 hours, like 48 hours, and we'll see what happens. But at the time, I thought to myself, like, at least I know what to expect now. I know where I'm going to go after this. I know where I'm going and what the process is looking like. So, like, things were a little clear, but in terms of, like, what was actually going to happen was confusing. So I remember going to sleep that night kind of still confused. And then, like I said, at the time, I was just going back and forth with just trying to understand things and trying to like keep myself composed through all this, because like I said, I had a 3-month-old, and his mom, my fiance at the time, she was going through a lot. She just had the baby. She's dealing with me being locked up. She's dealing with our son as well. So she was doing she did an amazing job, obviously, trying to keep me composed and raising our son. She was there for me and there for him, and it was a lot of stress on everyone. It was causing a lot of tension within my family and stuff. So it was definitely a very hard time for everyone. Um, and so I remember going to sleep that night, and I got woken up very early in the day. So the transportation guy wakes me up and takes me and tells me, "Hey, wake up! Get your stuff. We're leaving." And I'm confused at the time. I don't know why he's the one waking me up. He's never been in the, where we're being held. Like, I've never seen him there. So he, I get my stuff together, and I remember my cellmate was like, "Hey, man, hope maybe you're going home." I was like, "Yeah, maybe," but at this point, I kind of had a feeling like, you know, everything's working against me. It's not going to go my way at all. So I remember going to the front, same thing, same process. They gave me my clothes back, signed my release form, and as I'm sitting there, the transportation guy turns around and asks, "Hey, you know where we're going, right?" And I was like, I just, being me, I was just like, "I'm assuming you're taking me home, right?" And he goes, "No." He's like, "We're going back to immigration." And I thought, I fucking figured. Sorry. So then I remember he got me in this car, and I think that was the longest car ride that it was, I mean, it was a 4-hour car ride, but it felt like the longest car ride of my life. At this point, I think at this point, I had given up hope that things were going to work out in my favor. I think that's when I started just to like kind of come to grips with the fact that whatever happens to me, it's not going to be. I'm not going to end up on top of this. So I finally get all the way back to Alamance County, and this is again confusion all around because I got there. The same two, oh, sorry, the same two people that were in charge of us last time I was there were there again. Um, the transportation guy. We went up to the front. He presented the papers, but he presented it to the county, so they were unaware of what any of it meant. So they're like, "Hey, let's get the immigration guys down here, and maybe they know what's going on." The It was a lady. It was a short lady and then a tall guy that were in charge of us. And I met both of them and I talked to both of them. And so they were both aware of my situation. Again, they were the ones who told me, like, "We're not going to see you back here again." And so I was in the holding cell. I think that I was there for like another 4 or 5 hours. And they were just kind of going back and forth. Like, coming back and like, hey, we're trying to figure this out. You're not scheduled to be picked up, or you weren't scheduled to be picked up. So we don't know why the county brought you to us. Like, we didn't request for you back. We weren't gonna go pick you up. He's like, we're trying to square this away, whatever, whatever. So like, give us some time. So like, I'm sitting there waiting for a while, and so finally the lady came down and was like, look, you weren't scheduled to be picked up. We did not have you coming back to us. But since you're here, we've reached out to people above us, and they said, since we have you here now, we're just gonna keep you. And at that point, I had cried a few times while the whole process was going. I just smiled and laughed and was like, okay, like, whatever. And so finally I was able to make phone calls to my mom and my fiance at the time, and was like, explain to them what had happened. The county took me back to immigration. I was not picked up by immigration. And so when that happened, I again, like, I just kind of, I got to the point where I just didn't care. I was tired of being told when to wake up, when to eat, when I can go outside, when, like, I just wanted to be free again. Unfortunately, I still had a while before I was going to get that opportunity. Um, I so that day I was brought back to Alamance County was a long one. I was woken up like around 7 in the morning, 4-hour car ride to Alamance County, and mind you, this entire time I'm in handcuffs, the waistband, uh, chains on my ankles. Like, I'm chained up for from 8 in the morning to like 5 in the afternoon. And finally I get back up to the same the same holding cells I was in when I was first in Alamance County, but this time with a bunch of different new people. And so I went to sleep that night thinking, all right, like, it's been so much. I called my mom, my family, and I said, hey, like, I'm exhausted. I just need to go to sleep, and we'll figure it out tomorrow. There's nothing we can do today. There's no point in, let's just figure it out tomorrow. I remember going to sleep around 1 o'clock in the morning. I stayed up kind of talking to the guys there and kind of telling them what I've been through. And once it was like midnight, 1 o'clock, I finally fell asleep. And then like 2 hours later, I was woken back up by the people there, and they said, hey, you're on your way to Atlanta, or to Lumpkin, Georgia. And I was confused because I in my mind I thought, oh, I have a couple days here, I get to chill, and then I kind of compose myself a little bit. But it was like same day. So then again, same thing. They chained me back up from 4:30 in the morning all the way till 8 o'clock at night. So I was, in the span of 36 hours, I had probably slept a total of 8 hours, chained up for 20 of them. And finally got to Lumpkin, Georgia, and the process there was, longer than any other process I've had to go through, because it was like 70 of us. They're trying to process everyone, get everyone's information and everything. And then finally, that's where Lumpkin became where I was held for the next 4 months. Around a little over 4 months, I think. 4.5 months, I think, is what it was. And then from there, it was just a lot of waiting, sitting around doing nothing. Honestly, I think at the time, I don't know if it still is, but that facility was known as for being one of the worst maintained ones in the entire country. I had people that were spent 20, 30 years in prison, from drug charges to all sorts of things, to coming there, staying a week and saying, like, I'd rather go back and do 5 years in prison than to stay here another month. So it was a lot of very unfortunate events in there as well. I witnessed, mind you, I've never been in any situation like that or anything like that. So like for me, everything was very new. I had a lot of, I witnessed a lot of things I never thought I would see. I saw people get jumped, weapons being used on other people, such as like putting a lock around your hand, and people beating each other with it. Gashes on their faces, all sorts of stuff. I even saw one inmate stab another one with a shank. Um, Countless fights. I mean, we're probably, you probably saw a fight every other day, or every 3 4 days there was a fight of some sort, something being thrown, people being pepper sprayed. It was a lot. I mean, what do you expect when you have people from all over the country, all different charges being held in one area for what we were allowed 3 hours out per day. So and it's an open. There's individual cells where the door's closed, but you have a common area, and you're allowed out for the majority of the day. So when you have these many people, and no offense, but the guards there weren't. They were private security. They weren't guards. So when something would happen, they just weren't. They weren't equipped or trained to handle situations like that. Um, for instance, the I'm sorry, I think I'm getting a little off track. I'll just finish with this. But for example, but kind of just to give you like an insight of what the facility conditions were like when you're being held in a county, or I'm sorry, in immigration. Like they just weren't, they weren't equipped to handle that type of situation. Like I said, when the guy got stabbed, the inmates were the ones, or the the people that were being held there, inmates. We weren't. I'm sorry, we weren't considered inmates. We were labeled detainees, and so the detainees were the ones that had to jump in and save the guy. Like save the guy. A couple of the guys kind of when they kind of like split up. A couple of the inmates grabbed one of the guys, threw the guy that was being stabbed, threw him in a cell, and closed the door. Once you close them all the way, they're locked. The only people that can open it are the guards from the control room. So they kind of threw him in there, and then everyone kind of cornered the guy with the shank. But obviously, no one wanted to go in and try to take it from him. So eventually, one of the guards walks in, sees the commotion, and he walked up to me and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And I said, I thought you guys were like, at least like, I thought like they were preparing to come in, because obviously like the guards weren't just going to jump in. Then when situations like that happen, they kind of send in people with like the riot shield gear and stuff. So we were like screaming, banging on the glass to like someone at least come do something about it, because there's a rule there, like if two people are fighting and someone breaks it up, the person who breaks it up also gets in trouble. And so, but this guy was like, when you're using a shank, your mind is he's trying to kill him. So people jumped in to try to save this guy, and they did. They threw him in there. I think he was stabbed a total of 8 times. It was and so when that happened, you kind of get the sense like, oh, you're not really protected here. You're not really, like, if something were to go wrong, the chances of like your life is pretty much in your own hands at that point. And I'm not the biggest guy. I'm not a fighter or anything like that. But I always had the mindset like, I'm going to defend myself against anything and anyone, regardless of the situation. Luckily, even though given the situation was all bad, I used to joke, just to add, for people that are watching, I kind of want to give you guys a little like funny stories of what I did when I was in there. But let me finish first with what I have. So the problem with it, like the immigrant, like you want to try to fight your case if you can, but the problem is in immigration. While I was there, the system is designed to break you, in my opinion. It's designed. They take your name away, they take all of your identities away, and they give you a number. So when you go up to an immigration officer and you ask questions, they don't know you by name. They know you by a number. They'd be like, I'd ask questions about like, certain things, and I'd be like, my name is Daniel Arellano Munoz, this, that, and he would just stop me and be like, sorry. They'd be like, sorry, what's your alien number? And I'd give them my number, and they'd just type it in the computer. Oh, okay, well, yeah, here's what we have on you right now. And so, it was a lot. Even though the situation was looking kind of bad, we were still a little optimistic. I hired a we got a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, and I want to make a video about him, or at least address him, because I've kept my mouth shut on him too long, and I feel guilty about it. But we hired a lawyer, Cornejo something. I don't remember what his stuff was, but he was a horrible lawyer, and I think that I need I need to address his situation on another video. But he was a horrible lawyer. I had a bond hearing to get a bond. In immigration, you're not given a bond. You have to actually go and plead a bond with the immigration judge. And on my bond hearing, I remember showing up and thinking, I haven't met the guy. I haven't had a sit down with him. I haven't talked to him. Nothing. I remember showing up to court and showing up to court and sitting in front of the judge, and she called my case up, and I went and sat down, and she said, "Oh, I know this is a court hearing for a bond. Are you representing yourself?" I said, "No, I have a lawyer. I just don't know where he is." And he showed up late, and then he started trying to like plead my case for a bond. But I guess the judge, I don't know if it's because he was late. I don't know what the reasoning was, but I was denied a bond. And once I was denied a bond, this lawyer went to my mom and told him that it was my fault because I didn't show empathy, or empathy. I think that's the right word. If I'm wrong, correct me. And he put it on me. And when he put it, and at first I called my mom first and I said, hey, like we weren't given a bond. Like again, my family was very optimistic that I could get one, but I just wasn't given a bond. And then and so and I didn't blame anyone. I didn't tell my mom that the lawyer was late. I didn't say anything about it. I just said like, hey, like, you know, none of that matters really. I wasn't given a bond, so we just got to move forward from here. But then the lawyer called my mom and started blaming me and saying I wasn't up, I was just, it was my fault that I wasn't given a bond because I didn't know how to react or what the judge was looking for, whatever. So then I was given that, and I had him for a couple more weeks. I think maybe a month after that as still my lawyer. And it was just, he was awful. He is terrible. I'll get into more detail about all of that and what he did, because I think it's only fair that if he's charging people an arm and a leg, that he gets called out for what he really is. But anyway, like I was saying, so once I was given that, and once we fired that lawyer, we hired another one. He was sort of like he was a guy who moved to Lumpkin, Georgia, specifically to help people that needed, in in those types of situations, in immigration custody. So once we hired him, he was very straightforward. You know, that's when I realized that I was coming back to Mexico. He said, "Look, your charges, they could drop your charges tomorrow, and I can try to fight your case to stay here." He's like, "I just don't think they're gonna win." He's like, "DACA has expired for you, and they're just like, ultimately they're just gonna punish you for letting it expire." He's like, "There's no other way around it. You can't renew it now." Like, he's like, "The best thing that we can do for you is go to court and file for voluntary departure." And he presented this idea to me, and I was like, let me think about it, whatever, let me talk to my family. And they kind of they were already given the news, so they kind of knew about it and stuff. And so I had a conversation with my family and everything, and it was it was I just, I don't think, I'm sorry like, there was people in immigration that have been in there for 3-4 years fighting their case. The lawyer said, you can be here a year, you can be here 3 years, like, but it's not going to be a quick process. You're going to be in immigration for a very long time. And so I had a conversation with my family, and with voluntary departure, you're allowed to leave without it being counted as a deportation. So when you try to apply for some sort of visa or green card or something, it can't be used against you, I guess is what I was told. So I had a conversation with my family and everyone, and it was just Carlos was already here as well in Mexico. So I thought, we all agreed like, hey, let's fight for it. Let's see if we can get it. And so we all agreed to it, and we said, yeah, let's go for that. And I remember, it was still a very hard decision to make because even though I wanted to be free and be able to go out and do my own things, um, it was still very hard for me uh, to just pretty much say like, I'm giving up my life in the U.S. Everything that I know, all the friendships, all the things that I built for myself, like to let go of all that and just say I'm gonna go back to Mexico and start over with at the time, I think he was 7 or 8 months. My son and my fiance, to like start over in a country we know nothing about, was going to be hard. But we thought like, we just wanted to be together, and so we all agreed to it, and we all said let's do it. And so I remember I had a court hearing, the beginning of February, and not to throw salt on a wound or anything, but I think the thing that was also bothering me was the fact that I missed my son's first Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Halloween. I missed a lot of firsts with my son because of the time that I was locked up, and I did not want to miss any more. So I, you know, that's why a big reason why we decided we just wanted to be a family. Um, and so I remember going to court on my. It was supposed to be just a one court thing. You show up, you say, "Hey, this is what we want. If the judge can grant it, she looks at everything everything. The ICE agents look at everything and they make a decision on it. And so I remember going to that court hearing, and she started reading my charges, and they got the wrong Daniel, or I guess there was another guy named Daniel Arellano Munoz in custody or something. They started reading all these charges of driving without a license, while intoxicated, multiple DUI convictions, DWI convictions, like all these things. And they were saying I was 35 years old. Sorry, 35 years old, and 35 years old, and all these things. And I just looked at the immigration lawyer, and I was like, "That's not me. I don't know what's going on." He goes, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Those aren't my charges. That's not me. That's nothing to do with me." And so I'm sorry, he kind of stepped in and said, "Your Honor, like that's not my client. Like that's not who." And so there was a big mix up, I guess, in that situation, in that moment. And so they presented the wrong information. The judge was like, "I can't make a decision based on this now because, like, I thought to myself that this was going to be, um, that it was, it was just not, the information wasn't correct." So they had to push my court back a couple of weeks again. So I was going to have to spend more time in immigration. But then finally, I got my court date on the February 12th, I believe, was the day I presented. I went back to court, and I was given, and long story short, I was given voluntary departure. So that meant I could buy my own commercial flight ticket and fly commercial and not be, shankled up with everyone else and dropped in the border and everything. I got to fly directly from Atlanta Airport to Puerto Vallarta International Airport. So I didn't have to be locked up for in chains and everything. So finally, I was given the date. I had to be out by, so January 12th was my court date. February 12th was the day that my last day there. I remember that day they woke me up, took me to the airport. Still a very long process. Everything with immigration is long. So I was being held near the airport from like 6 in the morning till like a little, I don't remember the time, but it was a long time. And I remember from there getting on a flight, and this was the first time I've ever flown in a plane, so it was new to me as well. And then I remember finally getting on the plane, coming to Mexico, and I don't think it hit me until I was finally
when I landed in Mexico and was getting off the plane, that I was no longer in the United States. I was in a country I knew nothing about, culturally, lifestyle, everything. The only thing I knew was I had family here, I had my brother here, and I guess that was good enough for me at the time, because again, I just wanted to be free. I wanted to be able to do whatever it is I wanted to do without someone telling me if I could or couldn't. And so that's kind of, a little bit of my story. A little bit, sorry. That's how I ended up in Mexico. Hopefully that made sense. Hopefully that I think I covered all the big major moments. Obviously, I did leave a lot of things out. I mean, being locked up for 6 months, I have tons of stories to tell about just kind of things that happened while I was in county or in immigration. So if you guys have any questions, you guys have anything that you guys want to know, I'm an open book. I won't sugarcoat anything. I won't tell you guys, what you want to hear. I'll definitely, let you guys know what it was really like. And yeah, if you guys have any more questions and concerns or anything like that, please let us know, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.